Deaths in Glenmorach Manor, a fiction novel. Written by Shirley, read by Sir Lawrence Olivier. This audiobook was narrated using synthetic voice technology provided by 11 Labs. Chapter 19. The next evening, Glenmorach Manor felt heavier than usual, as though each wall within this mansion held many secrets. I couldn't shake the restlessness that had taken over since piecing together the clues about Benjamin and Rosy's deaths. The more I thought about Lady Lucy and what I discovered in her room, the more the weight of the investigation pressed on me. She had always been a mysterious presence in the manor. As Lord Wallace's sister-in-law and the widow of his younger brother, Edward Wallace, she had witnessed her fair share of life's trials. Yet there was always something about her, a cold, calculating edge, that unsettled me. She and her son, Anthony Wallace, lived in the East Wing pavilion of the manor, away from the rest of the family. They rarely seemed concerned with the happenings in the main house, but there was a lingering suspicion in the air whenever she was around. I sent Mr. Morrison to summon Lady Lucy to see me. It wasn't long before a soft knock came at the door. "Come in," I said, my voice steady but sharp, my eyes never leaving the papers spread before me. Lady Lucy entered the room, her presence commanding and regal, despite the unmistakable tension in her posture. She was dressed in a green flowing gown. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a woman who mourned far more for what she had lost in terms of wealth and status than any emotional attachment to her late spouse. She gave me a measured nod, and I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Please, take a seat, Lady Lucy. We have a few matters to discuss." She lowered herself into the chair, her eyes assessing me with a guarded expression. "I assume this is about Rosy Taylor, isn't it?" Her tone was cool, almost disinterested, but I could hear the faintest tremor beneath it. I was certain she had been waiting for this conversation to happen. "Yes, perhaps also related to Ben's murder," I said, not wasting time with pleasantries. "I need to ask you about your whereabouts the night Rosy was killed, 5 days ago. Can you tell me where you were?" Lady Lucy's lips tightened, and she leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "I was asleep, Mr. Owen. I heard about Rosy's death the following morning, like everyone else." Her voice remained calm, but her eyes flickered briefly, betraying the slightest hint of unease. "And your son, Anthony?" I pressed, keeping my gaze steady. "Do you know where he was that night?" She looked at me for a long moment before answering. "I'm sure Anthony was asleep. He doesn't usually wander around the manor at night. And even if he did, the East Wing is far from the main building, so we wouldn't have heard anything." "Very well," I said, accepting her explanation for the moment. "But there's something else I need to address, Lady Lucy." She raised an eyebrow, a knowing look in her eyes. "And what might that be?" "Have you lost something recently, my lady?" "To be precise, your diary. I believe you've been looking for it." Her reaction was immediate, shocked, wide-eyed, her hands tightening into fists in her lap. For a moment, she was silent, her gaze locking with mine. "My diary?" She repeated slowly, her voice dropping. "Why would you ask me about that?" I reached into the drawer of my desk and slid the small leather-bound book toward her. "Because I have it here. I've kept it for investigation purposes." Lady Lucy's expression shifted in an instant, first to confusion, then to fury. Her eyes blazed and her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. "How dare you? You have no right to invade my privacy like this. This is an absolute violation." She spat, her voice sharp and filled with venom. I held up a hand, trying to calm the situation. "I have permission from Lord Wallace and the authorities to search everyone's rooms, Lady Lucy. You're not the only one who's had their privacy breached. This is part of the investigation." Her fury didn't subside, but there was an underlying fear in her gaze that I couldn't ignore. I leaned forward, narrowing my eyes at her. "Lady Lucy, I've been investigating a letter I received on the night Benjamin Wallace died. The sender was anonymous, and I've kept it for this very reason." I pulled the letter from the folder and placed it on the desk in front of her. She looked at it, her expression unreadable. I've compared the handwriting of that letter with the handwriting in your diary, and the two match perfectly. Lady Lucy's breath hitched. For a moment, she didn't speak, but the color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, she finally whispered, "You're right. I sent the letter." I leaned back in my chair, studying her reaction. There was no denying the truth now. She had confessed. "Why did you send it to me, Lady Lucy? What was your purpose?" I asked quietly, my voice cutting through the tension. She let out a slow breath, her fingers trembling as she ran them through her hair. "I was helping your investigation, Mr. Owen." Her voice carried a cynical tone. "Should I feel flattered, my lady? I don't think I need an assistant." My voice deep and laced with sarcasm. "I was trying to give you a clue about what had been happening around the manor at night, in the darkness, when everyone had already gone to sleep. Rosy and Robert were frequently seen together, engaged in hushed conversations. Benjamin's death undeniably cleared the path for Robert to inherit the entire Wallace fortune from their father. Seemed like she wasn't done talking yet. As for Rosy, realizing that a future with Benjamin was no longer possible, she redirected her attention to Robert. She did everything to keep him under her spell, clearing the way to become Robert's partner and eventually the Viscountess of Ayrshire. Pretty clever, don't you think? Her voice tight with anger and her breathing heavy. I felt the air grow heavy as her confession settled in. There was a deep resentment in her words. An anger that had festered for years, no doubt. But it wasn't just her hatred towards Rosy. There was more, much more, that lay beneath her surface. And now I had a clearer picture of what might have motivated her. "You think your son should inherit the estate, don't you?" My voice colder now. Lady Lucy's eyes gleamed with a fierce, calculating intensity. "I don't know what you're accusing me of, Mr. Owen." She tried to deny it. "Am I truly accusing you of that, my lady? Your diary says a lot," I said, raising the diary and pointing it towards her. Suddenly, her tone became very confident as she tried to calm herself from my intimidation and began to defend herself, saying, "Of course, Anthony deserves it, just like my late husband, who was far more suited to inherit the Wallace title and legacy than Lord Wallace ever was. And if that means removing obstacles, then so be it. But I'm not the murderer, if that's what you're implying." I stared at her, unsure of her exact involvement, but now certain that she knew far more than she was letting on. The bitterness in her words couldn't be ignored. She had a clear motive for wanting Robert out of the picture. And now the question remained, was she capable of murdering herself, or had she enlisted someone else to do the dirty work? Then she continued her story. "Mr. Owen, I must tell you that my late husband, Edward Wallace, served in the military, being sent to a battle, and gave his life for this nation, upholding both the honor of his country and the pride of the Wallace family. Since his passing, I have been raising Anthony on my own. As for Lord Wallace, the firstborn of the family, he was excused from such duties due to health reason. Therefore, if you ask why I believe Anthony deserves to inherit the Wallace legacy, it is because my husband made the ultimate sacrifice for both the family and the country." Finally, she told me everything behind the reason for her bitterness. She shared it with tearful eyes, holding back her sadness and anger. "Lady Lucy, I understand your reason for why you think your son deserves to be the heir. But unfortunately, this is not how it works. And my job here is to find the murderer of Benjamin Wallace and Rosy Taylor, regardless of who's going to be the next successor. This investigation is far from over. And while you may not be directly responsible for Rosy's death, your actions speak volumes." My response was firm and unwavering. She stared at me, her face a mask of defiance. But there was something in her eyes now, something that spoke of fear and uncertainty. "You're not the only one with a motive, Lady Lucy," I added quietly. "But you are one of the most dangerous pieces in this puzzle." The conversation with Lady Lucy had taken a dramatic turn, and the atmosphere in the room grew thicker with tension. The quiet crackling of the fire was the only sound that seemed to fill the space between us. I stood still, watching her carefully. My mind raced, piecing together the fragments of evidence that had begun to form a clearer picture. Lady Lucy, I've been reading through your diary, and I must admit, there are some things more in it. Did you plan the murder of Robert Wallace? Her eyes widened for a moment, a flicker of panic flashing across her face before she regained control, her lips pressing into a tight line. What? No, of course not. What do you mean by that? I took a step forward, pulling the small leather-bound book closer to me. Slowly, deliberately, I flipped through the pages until I reached the entry I had marked. Her hands trembled slightly as I read aloud. And Anthony, as a Wallace, and after all the sacrifices my darling Edward had made when he was still alive, he should have been the rightful heir and entitled to it all. Her face went pale, the color draining from her cheeks. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Lady Lucy, this entry shows your true concern, your position within the Wallace family. After Lord Wallace's death, Robert will be the successor. What do you say about this? Her eyes darted away, but I didn't give her the chance to hide. I stepped forward again, pressing on with my reasoning. By sending me that anonymous message, you hoped that Robert or Rosy would be found guilty of Benjamin's murder. You wanted them either imprisoned or, perhaps you hoped, sentenced to death. That way, your son Anthony would be the successor. Lady Lucy's face turned from pale to flushed, a violent surge of emotion passing through her. She stood suddenly, her chair scraping back against the floor with a harsh sound. That's ridiculous. I would never do that. I love Robert like my own flesh and blood. I would never harm him. She shouted, her voice cracking. I waited, letting her words hang in the air for a moment. Her reaction was too emotional, too overblown. There was something about it that felt forced, as though she was trying to convince herself more than me. I wasn't about to let her escape that easily. I said calmly, watching her every move. I've read more than just that one entry in your diary, Lady Lucy. There's another passage that stands out. Let me read it to you. She faltered, but didn't speak, and I continued. What am I going to do about my future position in this family? What would happen to me when Lord Wallace is gone? Robert is now the heir. Somebody needs to stop his relationship with Rosy. She can't be the lady of this house. She hates me. She would send me away. I must do something before it's too late. I let the words settle between us, allowing the weight of them to press down on her. The silence was deafening as her lips parted, but no sound came from them. She looked like a cornered animal now, a mixture of fury and fear in her eyes. I took another step closer. My voice was soft but pointed. What exactly did you mean by that? What exactly are you implying by writing this? I must do something before it's too late. The question hung in the air, and for a long time, she said nothing. Her chest heaved as she struggled for control, her hands trembling slightly. I could see the anger in her eyes, but also the guilt, her pride, her desperation to cover her tracks. Finally, she broke, a harsh breath escaping her lips as she slumped back into the chair. Her composure faltered completely, and I could see the truth start to spill out. It was all for Anthony. After Edward died, I had nothing. Nothing to protect me and Anthony. We only rely on Lord Wallace's kindness, who has allowed us to live here comfortably all this time. But after that, what can I rely on? If Lord Wallace passed away, I have no idea what will happen to me and Anthony. She wiped her eyes quickly, clearly embarrassed at the display, but I could see the raw emotion on her face. She wasn't done yet. Robert, with Benjamin's death, he is now the rightful heir to the Wallace. I couldn't help but think, given so many disputes between Ben and Robert, he might have been capable of murdering his own brother. I confessed I used this chance to shift your suspicion onto him. If he were proven guilty and something drastic occurred as a result, Anthony could at last claim his place. I stood there, letting her confession settle over us both. The desperation in her words echoed louder than any of her previous denials. This was all about protecting Anthony and her future position in the Wallace. Lady Lucy feared being left behind and losing everything she thought she deserved. Lady Lucy, you were willing to let an innocent man pay the price for you and your son's future. You thought that if Robert were out of the picture, Anthony could become the Viscount. But there's more, isn't there? You were willing to kill to make that happen, am I right? Did you try to poison Robert in his bedroom that night, but accidentally killed Rosy instead? Tell me the truth, Lady Lucy. I cornered her with a barrage of questions that left her feeling trapped. She shook her head violently, tears now streaming down her face. No, I didn't. I would never kill anyone. I was desperate. But it doesn't make me a murderer. I stepped back, giving her some space to breathe. I had her. She had gone too far to lie now. She was desperate, yes, but so was everyone who had something to lose in this tangled web of deceit. Lady Lucy, I said, my voice now firm and resolute, your motives are clear. You've had the means and the opportunity. Your words and actions lead me to one conclusion. You may not have been the one who killed Rosy with your own hands, but you were certainly the one who set the stage for it. She looked up at me, her face crumpling into an expression of defeat. No, I didn't do it, Mr. Owen. I really didn't do anything to make someone lose their life. I just wanted a future for Anthony. And I thought I could make it happen by shifting your attention to Robert and Rosy. But that's all it is. I swear. Her voice broken, overcome with uncontrollable sobs of regret. I gave her a moment to collect herself, but I had to keep uncovering the truth, because the real murderer was still out there, lurking in the shadows. But one thing was clear. Lady Lucy was a key piece of the puzzle, and if Anthony was involved in any way, then I would have to bring him into this too. Finally, as I stood and made my way to the door and opened it for her, Lady Lucy, you may leave now, but I'll still be around until I solve these cases, and don't ever try to leave the manor. As she walked away, I couldn't help but wonder just how far Lady Lucy was willing to go to secure her son's future. Would she stop at nothing to see Robert fall? And what would happen if she truly was hiding a far darker secret than I had yet uncovered? There were still many more questions that needed answering, and the true murderer of Rosy Taylor was still out there, watching from the shadows. Lady Lucy had used me, manipulated the investigation, and was now trying to hide behind a veil of remorse. She knew exactly what she had done, all for the sake of securing a future for her son, Anthony. Had she orchestrated it all from behind the scenes, or was she merely an accessory to someone else's actions? I reached for my notebook and began to review the details of the interview. Her confession, though indirect, was telling that she had hoped, even actively worked towards, Robert's downfall. The desire to push her son into the position of power. It was all there in her diary. She had made her intentions perfectly clear for her own benefit. That was motive enough. Yet, as much as Lady Lucy revealed, there was still no tangible evidence that directly linked her to the murders. It was maddening. Every piece of her behavior pointed towards someone desperate to see Robert and Rosy out of the picture. But it wasn't enough to make an accusation stick. Suddenly, there was a knock at my door, and I stood up to open the door and found John standing there, his face unreadable. He was the one who had informed me about the potential changes of Edward Wallace's will, caused by Lady Lucy herself. I could see the concern in his eyes. I heard you just talk to Lady Lucy. Is everything all right, mate? He asked me with an undercurrent of worry. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms across my chest. Yeah, everything is fine, John. John looked at me with curiosity and asked, You didn't tell her anything about Edward Wallace's will, did you, mate? No, John, of course not. I'm not that careless. But I'll tell you this. Lady Lucy is not to be trusted. She's been working behind the scenes to manipulate my investigation. John curiously asked me, What are you going to do about it, mate? Report and have her arrested? I felt my chest tighten as I thought back to her confession. It's not enough, John. I can't accuse her of murder without something more concrete. He nodded slowly, understanding the frustration in my voice. So, what now? I need more evidence. Everything so far points to Lady Lucy. But there's no smoking gun. I can't just throw someone in prison based on assumptions. I need to know who truly killed Benjamin and Rosy and why. I glanced out the window, my eyes narrowing as I thought about the case. The pieces were all there, but they were scattered, like shards of glass that didn't fit into any clear pattern. I had to dig deeper. I had to find the link that connected all of this, and find the one person who would benefit most from the death of the Wallace heirs. I had no choice but to keep going,